Welcome to Something More with Chris Boyd. I'm Chris Boyd, certified financial planner practitioner, and my office is Asset Management Resources. I'm here with Jeff Perry, also an investment advisory representative. We're ready to join with our special guest, David Sampson. He is the VP of Cyber Risk and Strategy at Thrive. And Jeff, I'm really glad you invited Dave back because we've got so much to learn. He's always a great guest talking about cyber risk. But today we're going to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. AI, all over the news all the time. Even in the recent Republican debate, there was a line about Chat GBT.
That's
I'm
right.
sure like half the country says, "What is that? What are they talking about?" Dave, thanks for you're a resident cyber expert, so thanks for joining us again. And we've got a lot to talk about. I want to start though with what is this AI craze? If you watch the financial news, they're talking about the AI stocks. If you're watching practically any news segment, somehow AI gets into it.
How many podcasts have you heard about like learning different ways to use AI and where
No
it's
kidding.
prevalent and all this?
If you believe it all, you think AI is going to change the world in about 20 minutes here. Nobody's going to have to write a term paper anymore. They're
Yeah,
going to
right, right.
all the way up from all the things that you're probably most focused on, Dave, is security and cyber risk and that. But
But
for our
well, just
list,
as an aside,
yeah.
have you guys both used the Bing search engine that now incorporates Chat GPT in its responses?
I've experimented with it. Yes, I have.
Yeah,
I plead guilty to that. I don't think
check
I'll
it
use
out.
it though.
And I'm
Dave,
sure
Yeah, I haven't tried
Dave's all
haven't
over.
tried Bing yet, but the Chat GPT I have done a bit of testing with
Dave, why
at
don't you start
minimum.
out for those, I don't know, 50% of the people listening who have no idea what we're talking about, right?
So Jeff and Chris, thanks again for having me back. Always love coming on, and it's funny. I think when we talk about AI, for folks that are familiar with it, we generally expect that people know what we're talking about. So
right.
what is AI? It's artificial intelligence, and it's become an acronym that's just thrown around now like a common word. So I think it's important to give people a little bit of deeper understanding, but effectively, it's a deep learning, machine learning mechanism. So we're basically taking a lot of knowledge, a lot of data, we're feeding it into software through algorithms that process data, look to understand that, and determine how to dynamically provide you with feedback or recommendations or even actions
Right.
based on what it knows and what you're telling it. So we talk about Chat GPT, which I think is probably one of the areas where people interact with AI the most, especially given everything that's happened in the last year. We can feed information to Chat GPT. We can ask it questions. I mean, Siri would actually be a good example that I think a lot of folks understand. When you're talking
Well,
to Siri and Siri is providing uh,
A reply.
information back to you via your smartphone, or similar technologies on the Android phone platform, that's really AI. You're asking the computer a question, it's analyzing the question, using its internal algorithms to basically feed back data that it's been fed. And these platforms generally have some finite amount of data, at least at today's standards, so they're not
mm-hmm.
necessarily learning in real time. But this technology is evolving. It's evolving very fast. There's concerns about it, taking over like a Skynet
Yeah,
situation. Are the
Terminator.
computers going to dominate us? The education space, will students start using Chat GPT to write term papers, which
I
I'm
think we know
sure
the
is what
answer
they're
is
doing.
yes. We know the
It
answer
is
is
yes.
yes.
And I would predict that, and actually, I'm certain that it's true, but ChatGPT is likely writing a lot of the social media posts that you see. It's writing
Mm.
email messages. You can go to ChatGPT and say, write a letter to my dad, and it will come back with a 3-paragraph email for you. So the capabilities are very, very significant. I think that's one of the drivers why we've seen concern here in the US as well as in the EU about regulating the technology. They're concerned it's going to go too far too fast. The UK has taken a little different approach and said, let's embrace this and get it to do everything possible and put no boundaries on it. It's a rapidly evolving technology that is certainly going to be life changing. But like any technology, we need to pay attention to that a little bit.
Yeah, so that's a great introduction, Dave. Thanks for that. And in a different episode, Chris and I are going to talk about the impacts on investing in the market, and how some of these stocks are just flying high. But you're a cyber guy. Your title is talking about cyber risk. Certainly, what do you worry about the most? What, like, when you're thinking about AI? I know you have a lot to worry about in your role, but when you're thinking about AI specifically, to get the conversation started, what do you wake up at 2 a.m. and say, oh boy, we got to really focus on this because of the AI phenomena, if you will?
Well, I think that the biggest threat, biggest area of concern is we talk about the positives, and the examples I just gave really reflect
Right.
the positives. But what are the negatives? How could this technology be utilized in the opposite fashion? Let's tell an AI platform to go generate a new malware code for us, initiate attacks. Let's have AI interact with someone through a email chain, or perhaps a Facebook private message or other social media technology to represent a real person and scam folks out of money, or other identity theft type activities. Because the ability for this technology to impersonate a real person is real. When you're typing back and forth with someone, you can't tell who is on the other end, and it very well could be the technology. At the same time, from a threat perspective, on the positive side, the ability to collect data regarding attacks that are occurring, analyze that data, take actions against it to protect ourselves from a cyber risk mitigation perspective. So the larger security services providers like Thrive, who I work with, we're able to take a task that a security engineer may have performed in 25 or 28 minutes. We can get to the same place now in about 90 seconds through AI technology that's going to analyze it faster than a human could, and either take an action to maybe block an attack, or recommend that action to an engineer who can push the button and say yes. Generally speaking, experts are predicting there will be some AI-based attack in the reasonably near future, whether that's a email attack, malware, some other exploit that occurs. It's a question of when it happens, not a question of if it happens.
So you're scaring me a little bit. What I heard most of that is people who are the most vulnerable now to an attack or a phishing attempt, or theft of an ID, theft of a personality, online or real, are probably going to be more vulnerable, right? Because
100%, yes.
if you're likely to fall for a scam now, the scams are only likely to become more sophisticated. Is that fair?
They're going to become more sophisticated, and some of the indicators that we've seen over time. So when we look at scams that occur with email messages and things, generally speaking, those emails are not well written. There's repeated words in them. There's punctuation mistakes. There's capitalization mistakes.
Right.
Now that AI exists, it can be utilized to polish those emails to get a better product. That being said, I still see the same old sloppiness on some of those phishing attempts, and that's a good thing from an awareness perspective. But my message to people, generally speaking, is if someone is inbounding to you, whether it's through an email or a telephone call or whatever it might be, and you are not expecting that communication, you need to kind of go out, proactively seek out your own contact information, call whoever it might be and say, hey, I have this communication from you. Did you send it to me? Because a lot of these classic scams we're seeing, where folks are really transmitting funds unexpectedly, whether it's through bank fraud or gift cards, a lot of those are where someone is contacting them and saying, hey, we have a problem with your utility bill. We need to get funds from you today. We've automatically renewed your tech support through a variety of mechanisms via an email address. Contact us if you have any questions. And then when you contact them, it is a scammer. So you want to not only be aware of any communication that looks like this, but you also want to seek out your own contact information. So if you're going to call a Geek Squad, for example, or a PayPal, for example, don't use the phone number that's in the email. Go online, find their customer service phone number for whoever that entity may be, and reach out to them yourselves and say, hey, is this real? Because the amount of scams that are occurring, the frequency that they're occurring, and the amount of funds that are really being stolen from very innocent and probably the most vulnerable
Right.
individuals
Yep.
is just upsetting. And it's very easy to get scammed by these individuals. They're professionals. This is what they do. They know how to scam people, and they have a very methodical approach to doing it.
It's a numbers game for them. They don't need to scam everybody. They just need to scam you, or one person's a gold
Right.
mine for them if it's the right person. One of the scariest parts of the AI development, and there's lots of positives. It's going to increase productivity, and there's lots of positives in the market because of these increases in technology. But one of the scariest part isn't so much the emails to me, because you just gave us great advice of how you can ensure that you're talking to the right entity by being proactive. But you could receive, if not yet, very soon, or I'd love your comments on this, you could be receiving phone calls from a voice that you actually know, that you recognize. A scammer could be, if they have enough data, right, on a particular voice, they'll be able to create a conversation from that person artificially.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, it's likely. And I think folks are likely already aware of this, but something like caller ID, caller ID is not a very locked down technology. So it's very easy. I think when folks receive phone calls, they'll be like, oh, Jeff, you called me. I saw your phone number, or they called me from my own phone number. Phone technology is such say that you can set your caller ID to pretty much whatever you'd like. So caller ID alone is not a good gauge of understanding who you're talking to. But I'd expect that type of interaction over time is likely, and stuff that we see in the movies already, right? But things are going in those directions.
I think the cartoon when I was growing up of the Jetsons is actually a reality now. All the things that they were using in that comedy or that cartoon are, they were on Zoom 30 years ago, 40 years ago. They were
Right.
worried about,
We
you
don't
know,
have Rosie in our house. I
I
don't
know
know.
all the talking animals and robots in the house. It is a lot of opportunities for organizations to, as you said, be more productive and have more technology to protect themselves. But there's just so many more threats that are facing all of us.
Yeah. Well, it is evolving very fast. If we look just in our own lifetimes about what has changed from a technology perspective, what's coming in the next 50 years is things that we can't even imagine.
So I know that a lot of your clients are in the education and government world, correct?
Yes, a number of them are.
So how are, typically government and educational entities are not on the forefront of some of this protective measures to take, right? We see them in the news, how they're getting ransomware and all these different things. How are your clients prepared, or is this why they hire you, I guess?
Yeah, I think whether it's a government and education sector or the private sector, every business needs to be taking a comprehensive approach and saying, how do we address cyber risk? How do we mitigate that risk? How do we plan for it? How do we back up our data? And how do we measure and validate it on an ongoing basis? The good news from a government and education space, from my perspective, and it's cautiously good news. The state of New York recently took a pretty big step forward, more so than other states, in saying we are going to address cyber head on. We are going to establish standards. We are going to make technologies available to county and other government entities within the state of New York to help them mitigate cyber risk. We saw earlier this year in February, the city of Modesto in California had a very catastrophic ransomware attack. They were basically out of business for 6 months. The last I checked, they were well over $1 million in recovery costs. And the thing about cyber attacks and cyber risk mitigation and recovery is whether you're a school, a government, maybe even just a small business, maybe a small shop of 3-5 people, you have the same level of risk. If you're using the internet, if you're attached to the net, you have the same level of risk as a large enterprise, because these threat actors, these attackers, they're equal opportunity attackers. They're going to attack everyone. Business email compromise, or BEC, is really the highest threat risk that we see across the segment today. So emails are a very big thing to watch out for, but you think about a small shop of maybe 5 CPAs, like an accounting firm. I talked to some folks at a CPA convention in New Jersey in June, and it just takes one phishing attempt on a business email compromise. They will take your credentials. So maybe, especially if you're not utilizing multi-factor authentication, which we always recommend, getting that text message or a push notification to your phone, steal your email credentials, make some configuration changes so you can't tell what they're doing, and now they start sending new wire instructions out to your customers.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you talked a lot about small businesses, and I would suspect many of our listeners are those individuals that you're talking about. So what should a small business do? Let's just say they have nothing, or maybe they have some software. Maybe they have some of the, out of the box software. What's a good first step for a small business, as you described, to take a positive step at protecting their data and their customers and their money?
So I think from a kind of a low-hanging fruit approach,
yep,
the first thing is having the right attitude and approach. We're going to address this cyber risk. We understand that it's real. We understand that we need to do something. There's a lot of pieces to this that you can execute, but the low-hanging fruit, we need to have advanced endpoint protection on our workstations. So we want to make sure that our workstations can't get malware installed in them by using a next generation endpoint protection product, an EDR, an MDR, an XDR platform. These newer endpoint protection technologies, which we used to call antivirus, they're able to operate dynamically and protect those workstations. So that's one thing we want to do. We want to make sure our email is protected. We're using multi-factor authentication, and there's likely some email filtering platform that's actually filtering our messages to make sure that they aren't getting through. The other piece I suggest to every organization is addressing how you're transmitting funds electronically. So what is your business process? This is not a technology piece.
mm-hmm.
What's your business process around wire instructions? When you get new wire instructions, or you need to wire funds to anyone for any reason, how are you approaching that? Because receiving an email with wire instructions is a very bad source of truth around those wire instructions. You need to, again, proactively find the contact information, call that resource. Are these wire instructions from you? Because eventually a lot of folks do get caught in those types of situations. And as much as I think we're beyond that, the unfortunate piece is I'm still seeing that at least a couple, 3 times a month, where an organization has received new wire instructions, sent the payment out, then that vendor calls them and says, geez, we did not receive payment from you. And they say, well, we sent you payment on this date, and here's the number. Turns out those funds have been sent elsewhere. But one thing I do want to add, and this is really important, I recently did a joint presentation with some representatives from the FBI down in Miami. And the FBI has established a global network. And if you miswire funds, usually miswired funds are very hard to recover. But the FBI has set up a vehicle where they can generally recover those funds as long as they are made aware of it within 48 to 72 hours. So if you do miswire funds, you've been the victim of a cyber attack, my suggestion is to reach out to your local FBI office, let them know what occurred, and they will try to intercept that wire and pull those funds back before they get too far outside of the US. What they do is they take these funds and they end up jumping through a number of banking institutions. And the FBI, through their network globally, has set up a number of intercept points. So they will utilize their resources, look to intercept that wire transaction, and then you can get your funds back. The other piece I'd say is cyber insurance still is a thing. Cyber insurance providers are requiring entities of every size who want a policy to take a number of proactive steps. If you're not taking those proactive steps, they will not hold the value of your policy. So you can't just answer the questions right to get the policy issued. But following their guidance will provide very good protection. And I've been very impressed with the level of detail that they've gone through, as well as the thoroughness of the questions they're asking. They're asking the right questions about cyber risk mitigation technologies, business process that will really serve your organization well, no matter what size it is.
Very good. I see a lot of organizations, whether they be government organizations or private business, doing the right things in their office, meaning they're training employees quarterly or periodically on these threats that are out there. They have the appropriate endpoint protections on their devices, on their desktops, if you will, or if they have a laptop, they're installing them. I do wonder, though, about the danger and vulnerability of the things that we use the most, which are cell phones. I mean, most of us have our email or ability to connect to certain websites on our cell phones that we're using just like as if we're in the office. And whether or not the company is, maybe it's your own cell phone that you're using for the company, or maybe it's the company's provided cell phone. Is there a vulnerability in the cell phones just as any other device? And is it more vulnerable because we're not focusing our resources on protecting our cell phones?
So every piece of technology is somehow vulnerable, depending on the cell phone technology you're using. It may or may not be locked down more than others, and there's a lot of different philosophies on this. From a business perspective, mobile device management, or MDM, mobile application management, MAM, these are very important components out in the marketplace. So if you are using a personal device, or your employees are using personal devices, utilizing one of those technologies to protect company data that may reside on that device is very important, because if that device is compromised, if that device is lost, you want to be able to make sure that your company data is protected. We see a lot of supply chain attacks occurring. Will supply chain attacks get to cell phones at some point? It's very possible that will happen. And that's really where threat actors insert some malicious code into known software. And then all of a sudden, that malicious code has been deployed widely because individuals trust that particular software. And now it's on workstations. Maybe that will get to cell phones at some point, and smartphones. I'm certain that it will. But one of the areas we're seeing this year that really Gartner has put out as a research piece is cyber mesh technology, or cyber mesh architecture, really. So we're talking about all these different solutions around multi-factor authentication, mobile device management, endpoint protection, password policies. How do we start to bring all this stuff together and take a comprehensive look at it? Because a lot of these solutions don't necessarily talk to each other. So cyber mesh architecture, or the leveraging of a real platform of services that are integrated together, will become more and more important. How are our cyber risk mitigation technology solutions interacting and talking to each other? How are we filtering all that data so that we can get reports on it and take a look at it and take action on it? How do we make decisions? And you don't have to be a cyber expert or a computer expert to understand the cybersecurity posture of your organization. But what you do need to do is you need to work with a partner or a trusted resource who can take that comprehensive approach, can be looking at the state of cyber at your organization on an ongoing basis, really 24-hour response, someone that's looking at a computer, and they're able to provide reporting to you, at least on a quarterly basis is our minimum recommendation. At least quarterly, as a business owner, you want to be taking a look and saying, this is what the current state of cyber at my organization is today. If an event happens today, we have a plan of who we're going to call. We know what recovery looks like. And by the way, we've tested it. And here's evidence of the testing. We are certain that we are doing what we say we are doing. Because calling me up and saying, hey, Dave, are we protected? I'm like, oh, yeah, everything's great. That is the worst validation vehicle. This is not an IT guy problem. It's not a security guy problem. It's really a C-level problem. It's a board level problem. How are we protecting ourselves as an organization from this very real threat?
Dave, thanks for all that. Let's, in the last couple minutes of the show that we have, let's go back to where we started with AI, artificial intelligence, weighing all the pros and cons. Give us a couple of the pros, how you see AI developing and that it's going to positively impact the life of our listeners.
I think that the opportunity there is really endless, because AI is being applied to every technology interaction that we make, whether it's in the business world or in our personal world. We think about things like Nest thermostats that are adjusting the temperature for us based on when we are and are not at our homes. Even Alexa, right? Alexa's controlling our light switches. More and more learning and more automation will take place. I think that some of us really embrace and enjoy these technologies. Others are more leery. You know, it's something that needs to be paid attention to, because there will be incredible positives that come from this. But I am certain that as we continue to progress, the right boundaries will start to exist. Our lives are greatly controlled by technology that exists today, and control systems, you know, firewalls, all these different things. So making sure that they all work together will lead to the best outcomes. But I don't know of any technology where this is going to stop, technology that we interact with, right? Because even from the perspective of your scale at your house today, your scale will feed back to your smartphone to track that, to give you information about your health data, or your blood pressure cuff, right? So we're tracking all of this data. All of that data will be used towards more and more positive actions.
So you're saying if I'm out to dinner and about to order that 22-ounce ribeye, my scale's gonna send me a message to tell me you might want to have your cholesterol checked and have a salad.
It might. That's probably what's going to happen. We're going to get there.
Dave Sampson from Thrive, thanks so much for joining us. We always appreciate your insight and your thoughts on this, and it's another brave new world in this AI world, and we thank you for your comments.
I appreciate you both. Thanks for having me, and definitely I encourage your listeners to pay attention to the news, because there's more to come.
Thanks for being here, Dave. Until next time, keep striving for something more.